Hi there everyone, welcome back to On the Flip Side. My name is Adam Shawalker, reminding you that I don't only review new albums, and with that in mind, we are going to be checking out Pharmakon's sophomore album, Bestial Burden. This album came out in 2014, and while I only became more aware of Pharmakon in the past few years, I have rarely gone more than a week without thinking about this album since hearing it for the first time just a little while back. Pharmakon is a smaller act, for those of you who don't know, fronted by Margaret Chardit. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Pharmakon as a project is a step into the worlds of harsh noise, power electronics, and death industrial. And if you're thinking, wow, what the hell does that sound like? Well, I'll tell you, it's utterly striking and viscerally uncomfortable. This album was created after Margaret was sent to the hospital before a European tour, thus causing her to reflect during her recovery on new topics for her next album, namely the strong themes of the betrayal she felt towards her own body and the limitations of form in performance. The tracks on this all layer Merzbow-like walls of noise with whirling synths and inhuman-like shrieks and screams. Sonically and even a little bit thematically, it feels very similar to 1992's Plague Mass by Diamanda Gallis, so the instrumental side of things are definitely a little bit more present than a project like that, but energy-wise, they are on a very similar wavelength. The first track, Vacuum, is a really claustrophobic track that's about like a minute and a half of just intense, deep, gasping breath that becomes more erratic and more intense over the course of the song. Low building synths pair up on the bottom of the track, adding to the very anxious feeling that this song has. As far as openers go too, this one is really just a great mood setter. I mean, it's just so effective, it is simple, and genuinely makes me feel sick. Intent or Instinct is the first proper musical cut on the album at an 8.5 minute long runtime. This thing is a colossus of deep, booming drums, wailing synths, and banshee-like cries all coming together for a very direct assault on the listener. And a lot of the sound on this album I would almost describe as like Cronenberg-esque. It's the audio equivalent of body horror. Body Betrays Itself might be my favorite cut on the album. This track feels like right in line with whatever the most violent sound you've ever heard or could possibly think of is. That's right up there with it. It's raw, it's powerful, there's a crushing weight that this track uses as a blanket, again working with the simplicity to provide this full effect of just pure vitriol just frothing from the mouth. And I know the definition of heavy has many interpretations, especially for the more extreme side of any genre, but this legitimately might be one of the heaviest songs ever written from the angle of raw, unadulterated spite. Just the pure amount of that's in this song. Occasionally when I go to the gym, if I'm really needing to like force myself into a kind of fight or flight mode to really get through like a heavy set, I'll put on this song just to kind of force myself into just this gut reaction of panic, just to get out a burst of energy just to finish a set. This song is nuts. Past this point, the album does start to walk on its own tail a little bit. You get another track, Primitive Struggle, which is very similar to the first song on the album. It just sounds like someone violently retching up bile that they may or may not be choking on for like 2 minutes. That leads into the track Autoimmune. This track starts to move away from the massive walls of lower frequency synths to a very high-pitched wailing that, while it is intense, it does get a little bit old pretty quickly, though that can generally be overlooked by Margaret's frankly insane vocal work, which again is very blunt and almost sounds as if it's being like forcibly ripped from her lungs. I mean, I can't think of another album off the top of my head that actively sounds like it's hurting the performer. The title track, Bestial Burden, has a similar effect to the last track, though there is a bit of a variation in pitch and intensity for these vocal parts. The synths and hypnotic electric noise walls are still very present, but the rest of the vocal work feels very confrontational in a way. And it's not really varied in a way that softens the harsh, bitter lines. It's kind of just changed up just enough to land in a completely uncanny sound that seems kind of meant to catch you as off guard as possible. One thing is just the screams of like bloody murder that are all over this project, to me, are incredibly fresh. I'm honestly surprised that this isn't a sound that you would hear more often. The bonus track on this thing is a cover of Bang Bang, which I wasn't sure if I wanted to include in this review because sonically it does kind of stand apart and stand a little bit on its own, so much so from the rest of this album. I still feel like they managed to sort of mesh it and make it like an integral and cohesive part of the track listing, despite how different it sounds. It's kind of like a palate cleanser in that way. But the delivery and the execution of this cover makes it feel like it's right in line with the other tracks, just kind of from a different approach of heaviness. And hey, if you can't stomach the walls of harsh noise and grinding industrial waves of death, then you will still probably at least enjoy this song to a certain degree. I think this for me is far from a perfect album, but in my opinion, this album has some moments that I would consider essential listening for anyone checking out sounds on the fringes of the more extreme genres. And this album has really lived rent-free in my head for months, and I think it will continue to do so despite its drawbacks. I'm feeling a pretty solid 7 on this one. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of the album in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe and check out my Instagram, my Reverb, and my Depop. Links to those are in the description below. Thank you all so much again, and we'll see you on the flip side.